It began like any other day. The pool was calm, the sky above, clear, warm, unassuming. The kind of day where nothing feels dangerous. Below the surface, a shadow moved, slow, powerful, measured. An orca, gliding through stillness, his movements smooth, deliberate. Above him, a figure stood at the edge, wetsuit zipped, whistle around her neck, eyes focused, confident. That woman was Clara Jensen. She was 31, not just a trainer, but a presence. Not just a presence, but a constant. For nearly a decade, she had lived a life suspended between two worlds, the human world of rules, routines, and responsibilities, and the orca's world, primal, vast, misunderstood. To most, Clara was the face of harmony and captivity, a symbol of control, elegance, and trust. To guests watching from the stands, she was the woman who could command a 6-ton predator with the flick of her wrist. But to the whale beneath her, Kaero, she was something more. She was rhythm. She was routine. She was safety in a life he never chose. Day after day, Clara entered his world with the same voice, the same scent, the same softness that made him pause, that made him, perhaps, feel seen. And for years, it worked. There was balance. There was understanding. Or so it seemed. But trust is delicate. And when it breaks, it doesn't crack gently. It shatters. And on one warm afternoon, without warning, that bond collapsed. The silence of the tank exploded. And the water, once shimmering and serene, turned red. What happened in those next few minutes would haunt everyone who witnessed it. But the truth? It didn't begin with violence. It began with love, with belief, with a human heart, reaching for something wild and finding something it could never truly hold. Clara wasn't naive. She wasn't reckless. She knew what Kaero was, a predator by nature and a prisoner by design. But she also believed deeply in something most people couldn't see. A language beyond speech, a bond shaped not in words, but in presence, patience, rhythm. She believed that through years of routine, repetition, and trust building, a human heart could reach a captive mind, that kindness could touch something ancient, something wild, and hold it still. Kaero was her partner. But he was also 6,000 kilograms of sheer muscle, instinct, and intelligence. Born into steel walls, raised on fish buckets and hand signals, he had never felt the deep ocean's pull, never chased live prey, never heard his pod's voice. Instead, he heard clicks from trainers, cheers from crowds, and the echo of his own loneliness bouncing off acrylic walls. Clara knew all of this, and yet she stayed. Because Kaero was not just a subject of her training, he was the subject of her soul. Every morning, she would approach his tank, not with authority, but with reverence. She'd kneel, she'd smile, she'd whisper words only the water could carry. "I see you," she'd say. "I'm still here." And every time, he responded. With a spy hop, a nuzzle, a moment of recognition that felt sacred. For 7 years, they danced this quiet dance, a ritual that blurred the line between control and connection, between science and sentiment. And in those 7 years, Kaero never missed a cue, never lashed out, never broke character. To Clara, that meant something. But what she couldn't know, what no one could truly know, was how much pressure was building behind those dark, glassy eyes. And what would happen when it finally cracked? Before we dive deeper into Clara's story, pause for a moment. If you care about the animals we share this planet with, if you believe their lives, their freedom, and their voices matter, hit that subscribe button. Comment below, should intelligent marine creatures like orcas be held in captivity? And most importantly, share this video. Let your voice ripple beyond the screen, because change begins with awareness. And awareness begins with you. The incident didn't happen under stadium lights. There were no cameras flashing, no cheering crowd, no scheduled choreography. It wasn't a show. It was a routine training session, the kind Clara had done hundreds of times before. It was just her, Kaero, and the silence of captivity. She entered the tank area like she always did, calm, confident, present. Her voice was steady, her body language relaxed. Kaero surfaced once, briefly, and then hovered, barely moving, his dorsal fin cutting through the water like a blade. But something was different. Another trainer watching from above later said, "It was like the water changed temperature, like the whole room suddenly held its breath." Kaero had stopped responding. He didn't follow hand signals, didn't echo her vocal cues. Instead, he stared. His eyes, usually soft and observant, became fixed, empty, unblinking, not angry, not affectionate, just unreadable. Clara tried again. A whistle, a hand gesture, a familiar command for a breach. Kaero dove beneath the surface, obedient it seemed, but what followed wasn't obedience. There was a pause, a long one, just stillness, just Clara, floating, waiting. And then, a violent eruption. Kaero launched from below, rising like a missile through the tank, his full mass exploding from the water. But this was no graceful arc, no playful display. His jaws clamped around Clara's midsection midair. The sound, brutal, raw, a collision of trust and instinct. She didn't scream. There was no time. 1 second she was reaching toward him. The next, she was gone beneath the surface, dragged down like a shadow vanishing into the deep. No one moved at first, no alarms, just the sickening realization. This wasn't part of the plan. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a glitch. It was a rupture, the kind that comes when something powerful breaks from pretending. Kaero didn't rise for air. He stayed below, locked in motion, locked on Clara. When he did resurface, part of her wetsuit came with him. It was no longer a training session. It was a moment of reckoning, one that no one could stop. Kaero didn't hesitate. He didn't flinch. He surged upward, clamped his jaws around Clara's side, and lifted her high into the air like a rag doll suspended in time. There was no mercy in his grip, no hesitation in his spin. He twisted violently, then dragged her beneath the surface, as if trying to erase her from the world she once trusted. The water churned with panic. Trainers screamed. Alarms exploded through the facility. Emergency protocols kicked in. But they were made for control, not chaos. Within seconds, the pool became a stage of horror. Clara surfaced briefly, arms flailing, her face gasping for the air Kaero wouldn't allow. Then she vanished again, sucked under by a force no human could match. He wasn't playing. He wasn't confused. He wasn't performing. He was breaking. Unraveling after years of containment, years of applause, years of pretending steel walls were his ocean. The attack wasn't sudden. It was sustained. For 18 long, harrowing minutes. Kaero held her, dragged her, crushed her, over and over again. Each movement more brutal than the last. Each moment an echo of something deeper, something wild, clawing its way back to the surface. Her body surfaced, then slipped away again. Like a ghost caught between worlds, a silhouette of trust swallowed by betrayal. Divers jumped in. They tried to distract him, banged on gates, tossed in food. Nothing worked. Kaero had made a decision, and in his world, there were no negotiations, only instinct. When they finally recovered her, Clara was unrecognizable. Torn wetsuit, multiple fractures, internal damage beyond measure. She was already gone. But this wasn't just the loss of a life. It was the collapse of a myth. Because Kaero didn't just take Clara, he tore open a silence. One that the marine park industry had wrapped in smiles and show tunes for decades. A silence built on illusions, that whales could be tamed, that intelligence could be boxed, that love was enough to hold back nature's roar. That silence bled into the water that day, and it has never fully cleared. Why did it happen? That was the question everyone rushed to answer. Some pointed fingers at Clara. They said she misread a signal, got too comfortable, forgot for just a moment that Kaero wasn't her colleague, but a predator. Others blamed the Orca, said he was unstable, unpredictable, a threat that should have never been trusted. But maybe, just maybe, the truth is much harder to accept. Maybe the problem wasn't Clara, and it wasn't Kaero. Maybe it was the cage they were both trapped in. Because captivity doesn't just change animals, it rewires them, breaks them, buries their instincts beneath years of repetition. Until one day, those instincts claw their way back, louder than any whistle. Imagine being born into a box, told to jump for food, to twirl for cheers, to smile for survival. Now, imagine knowing you were meant for something more, but never tasting it. That was Kaero's life. A brilliant mind, a wild soul, confined to a concrete prison, measured in meters, not meaning. Maybe no tank can hold 6,000 kilograms of instinct. Maybe no routine can suppress a heart that longs for the sea. Maybe no creature, human or whale, should have to perform to feel worthy of love. Clara understood that. She wasn't blind. In fact, just a week before the attack, she wrote something in her journal. Something quiet, something devastating. He's not free, and neither am I, but I love him anyway. Those weren't just words, they were a confession. A final whisper of a woman torn between what she believed in and what she was trapped inside. If this story is making you pause, if something in your heart feels heavier than it did a few minutes ago, don't look away. Don't scroll past. Subscribe. Not for us, but for the voices that can't speak. Hit the like button. It tells the algorithm this story matters. Share this video with your friends, your teachers, your students, your followers. Leave a comment. What do you think? Should intelligent creatures ever be kept behind glass? Let's build a world where we don't need shows to feel wonder, where understanding replaces entertainment, and where compassion finally gets louder than profit. In the wild, orcas swim over 100 miles a day, across open oceans, through icy depths, beside the family they're born into and never leave. In captivity, they swim in circles, endlessly, aimlessly. In tanks so small, a single flip of their tail could hit the wall behind them. They speak in dialects, specific vocal languages passed through generations. They sing, click, echo, and remember. When a pod member dies in the wild, orcas mourn. They carry the body, they slow their pace, they grieve. Like us. Clara believed in their intelligence. She didn't just see them as performers, she saw them as people, different, but not lesser. She believed that connection could replace control, that understanding could override instinct, that love could soften captivity. But captivity, doesn't just trap bodies, it twists behaviors. It bends nature until it breaks. It teaches wildness to smile for fish, and then punishes it when it forgets how. These aren't pools, they're pressure cookers. Tanks lined with mirrors, where massive minds pace in silence. Boredom boiling beneath the surface. Years of confinement calcifying into frustration, confusion, rage. And then, one day, it erupts. Kaero wasn't a monster. He was a prisoner, a thinking, feeling being, trapped in a role he never chose. He didn't act out of malice. He acted out of something far more terrifying. Suppressed instinct finally set free. He wasn't misunderstood in that moment. He was finally understood, but only when it was too late. Clara spent years trying to speak his language, but on that day, he spoke back. And the world finally listened. This story isn't just about whales. It's about us. About the stories we tell ourselves to justify what we do, to keep the gates open, to keep the shows running. It's about the illusion of control and the cost of mistaking compliance for trust. Because Clara loved Kaero, that much is undeniable. She poured years of her life into him, hours in freezing water, moments of quiet touch, endless rehearsals and whispered promises. I see you. I'm still here. But what do we do when love isn't enough? When devotion collides with the brutal truth that empathy can't undo captivity, that even the gentlest hands can't hold back instinct forever. Clara's family never turned their grief into blame. They didn't rage at Kaero, they didn't demand revenge. Instead, they stood in front of cameras with trembling voices and broken hearts, and they asked for compassion, for understanding, for change. They begged the world to rethink the spectacle, to end the shows, to stop trading intelligence for applause. They believed Clara would have wanted it that way, because she knew, deep down, that Kaero wasn't a killer. He was an echo of everything the industry refused to hear. But the marine park? They held a press conference behind polished podiums and practiced words. They called it a tragic accident, a rare event, an unfortunate misstep in an otherwise safe environment. No one mentioned the repeated warning signs. No one talked about the history of suppressed aggression. No one asked how long Kaero had been trying to speak. And the very next day, the show went on. Families returned. The splash zone filled. Trainers smiled. Whales jumped, as if Clara had never existed, as if blood had never darkened the water. In the years since Clara's death, whispers have turned to roars. Laws have changed. Some marine parks have shut down. Others have phased out performances. But too many still operate in silence, behind splash zones and smiles. What would Clara say if she were here? She might say, "We can't undo what happened, but we can decide what happens next." If Clara's story touched something in you, don't let it end here. Subscribe, not just for more stories like this, but to be part of a movement that values truth over spectacle, a community that believes compassion is louder than profit. Comment below, what's one thing this story made you feel? And share this with someone who needs to be reminded that behind every show, there's a soul. Because stories like Clara's, they deserve more than a headline. They deserve to be heard, remembered, and never buried. Kaero was eventually transferred to another facility. He no longer performs, but he still circles, still waits, for something he'll never feel again: the open sea. Clara's ashes were scattered off the coast of Vancouver Island, where wild orcas still roam. And maybe, just maybe, they heard her. This isn't just a tragedy, it's a lesson. Nature isn't ours to control, it's ours to respect. Clara Jensen believed in connection. Let her story remind us that love without freedom isn't love at all. Remember Clara and Captivity. Listen to the ocean.